Okay, hi everyone. The article that I chose to share for this assignment was called Heightened Test Anxiety Among Young Children, Elementary School Students' Anxious Responses to High Stakes Testing. And this is actually a study. So let's move on. This study explored differences in test anxiety on high stakes standardized achievement testing and low stakes classroom testing among elementary school children. Relatively little research has been conducted that directly examines the relationship between student test anxiety and federally mandated No Child Left Behind, or NCLB, achievement assessments. A number of researchers have examined the perceptions that teachers, parents, and school administrators have about the impact of large-scale testing program on students. And these studies suggest that state testing programs have resulted in increased student anxiety, increased stress, lowered motivation, increased focus on test preparation, and increased job stress and lowered job satisfaction for teachers. So it's a whole gamut of effects that happen just because of high anxiety for stress or for testing. So this current study examined how children in grades 3 through 5 perceived high stakes standardized state achievement testing. This population was selected because NCLB, which is the No Child Left Behind Act, requires that annual achievement testing begin in grade 3. The researchers hypothesized that test anxiety among students would be significantly greater for high stakes testing than for classroom testing. So the methods, measures, and data collection. The methods that the researchers conducted were school children in grades 3 through 5 in 3 different elementary schools in a non-named Midwestern state were invited to participate in the study. Parental consent was obtained from 335 children, and they were the ones who participated in the study. The majority of the children were Caucasian, at 82%, followed by 7.2% Latino and 4.5% African American students. 10% of all students were identified as receiving special education services. So the measures were that test anxiety was measured using 2 scales. The first scale is called the Children's Test Anxiety Scale, or the CTAS, and that was designed to measure test anxiety in children grades 3 through 6. The second scale was the Test Anxiety Content Subscale of the Behavior Assessment Scale for Children, second edition, or the BASC-2-TA. This measures a child's irrational worry and fear regarding test taking. So using those 2 measurement scales, students were asked to think about the NCLB testing experience that they had just finished while they were answering these questions. And then 2 weeks later, they were given the same task, but were asked to think only about classroom testing when answering the questions. Classroom testing such as like the weekly spelling test or whatever math they had been working on the last couple of weeks, those types of testings that are given by the teachers in the classroom. So this gave the students the ability to differentiate between the 2 different types of testing. The results were that approximately 10% of students experience clinically impairing test anxiety, which is classified as severe. Most students, at 59%, reported moderate test anxiety, and fewer students, only around 32%, reported low test anxiety. But overall, 25% of students reported increased test anxiety about the NCLB assessment and were reclassified into a higher test anxiety level, with 60% of students remaining stable across testing conditions. So 25% of the students thought it was more stressful to do the big standardized state tests. So the largest shift in test anxiety classification occurred in the number of students who reported low test anxiety about classroom testing and were then reclassified as moderately test anxious in the high stakes testing condition. It is interesting to note, however, that a subset of students reported less test anxiety about the NCLB assessment. So there's kind of, the results were a little bit of everything. The most important, the most important finding is that students in elementary school report significantly more overall test anxiety and more cognitive and physiological symptoms of test anxiety about high stakes testing than classroom testing. More students report moderate levels of test anxiety about NCLB testing than about classroom testing. And by understanding that students experience more test anxiety about NCLB testing, teachers, educators, and even policymakers may more effectively prepare students to cope adaptively with these different types of testing. That's all I have. Thank you. Have a good one.